Hello and welcome to the Dream Team Professor podcast. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the top players to target in March with our Sun Dream Team transfers. We're going to start by looking at fixture volume and difficulty, and then we're going to go through and highlight the top players to target from each of these teams. So starting with fixture volume, we have on the left-hand side of the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, we have the number of fixtures each team could potentially play in March. So you have Man United with a possible 7 and West Ham with a possible 7. The reason this is possible, and I've put an asterisk next to these teams, is because these teams could either lose a fixture or change the fixture in game week 27, depending on FA Cup results. Some took place yesterday and some are going to take place tonight. So Man United have a possible 7, West Ham have a possible 7. These could become 6. Arsenal have 6, Chelsea have 6. Liverpool could have had 6. That's now gone down to 5 after Fulham beat Leeds yesterday. Brentford now plays 6, Brighton plays 6, Man City have a possible 5, Spurs have a possible 5, and then Newcastle and Leicester definitely will play 5. There are other Premier League teams that you can choose from, but I don't think they're worth considering in March, so I'm going to be leaving those ones out. So the teams that could have affected fixture volume, start with Manchester United. So they could have a possible 7 fixtures. Basically, they'll have 7 fixtures if they go on to beat West Ham tonight in the FA Cup. But because their opponent would have been Brighton, Brighton beat Stoke yesterday. So Brighton will be playing in the FA Cup in game week 27. So if United end up losing to West Ham, they'll have a blank fixture that game week. But if they go on to beat West Ham, they'll now have a rearranged FA Cup fixture. West Ham, it kind of works the same way around. West Ham were due to face Manchester City in the Premier League. City just went through yesterday against Bristol. So if West Ham can beat Man United in the FA Cup, they will have an FA Cup fixture on that weekend. But if they don't, Manchester City now have another FA Cup game. So West Ham will blank on that game week. That is game week 27. I've highlighted the rest of the possible outcomes here as well. So Brighton, as we just mentioned, they've beat Stoke. So they'll have an FA Cup fixture that week. They are due to play Manchester United. So Brighton will play anyway, but they're due to play Man United. If Man United beat West Ham, they will have an FA Cup fixture. City have just beat Bristol City, so they'll have a rearranged FA Cup fixture instead of their Premier League game against West Ham. Spurs, if Spurs can beat Sheffield United or Southampton beat Grimsby, then obviously they'll have FA Cup fixtures on that weekend. Liverpool, they would have been due to play Fulham, but Fulham have beat Leeds. Game week 27, they will now blank. And Brentford will definitely play 6 games now because Leeds failed to beat Fulham. I hope that does clear things up, but these fixtures will update on places like FFSTUFF or in the Dream Team app fairly soon after these FA Cup fixtures have finished. Then on to fixture difficulty, and just a quick reminder before we do this, I'm going to run through all of the possible fixtures in March. If you are just interested in the players to target, you can skip, there's timestamps below, and you can just skip straight to the players to target from each team. So I've got a graphic up here from FFSTUFF which shows you how many games each team are going to play, and you can change the arrows around so it counts the amount of fixtures. Obviously it's a difficult time to do this because of what I said previously. The FA Cup fixtures do change things a little bit, so I'm going to highlight it in this video, but that column where it says Friday the 17th of March, that is the game week where the fixtures could be affected by the FA Cup. So some of these fixtures either could blank or could be rearranged for FA Cup ties. So I'm going to start with Arsenal as my best team to target, and this is solely based on my opinion, so maybe it's biased, but personally looking at these fixtures, this is the order that I think I would be targeting the teams. So Arsenal have 6 fixtures in March. These are Bournemouth at home, Sporting away, Fulham away, Sporting at home, Crystal Palace at home, and then Leeds at home. So 6 fixtures, and I do think all of these look winnable. It's obviously not as straightforward as that. Arsenal are in the title race at the minute, and having those Europa League fixtures chucked in could make the following games a little bit difficult with travel, etc. But I do think these 6 fixtures for Arsenal are the best fixtures to target in March. Man United, I'd say a real close second, and I can understand the argument for putting them first, to be honest. They have a possible 7 fixtures, so they have slightly one more game than Arsenal if they do go through in this FA Cup game. So they face Liverpool away, they have Real Betis at home in the Europa League, they have Southampton at home, they have the return leg away at Betis, and then that Brighton fixture, that one's going to be rescheduled now. They'll either blank, or if they go through against West Ham tonight, they'll have their FA Cup game placed there. So pretty much ignore that Brighton one. Newcastle away, and then Brentford at home. So potential 7 fixtures for Man United. It still is looking really good for them, and the fixtures are pretty good still. Obviously Newcastle could be a tough one, but they have just beat Newcastle in the Carabao Cup final. Liverpool, that's always going to be a tasty game, and those European fixtures are going to be fairly tough still, but I do think Man United are in a good moment at the minute, so they should be pretty good for March. Man City, this is a slightly difficult one because they have a potential of 5 fixtures, well, they will have 5 fixtures actually now they've beat Bristol City, but they're still going to be playing potentially less than 2 less than Man United and 1 less than Arsenal. So that is one thing to consider, and they do have a lot of rotation as well. So there's a chance that all of the players that you put in might not play all of these 5 fixtures either. A very high chance actually. So that puts me off Manchester City a little bit, but they still have really good players and a really good team. So they face Newcastle at home in the first game. They don't have a midweek fixture that week. Then they face Crystal Palace away. They have RB Leipzig at home in the second leg of their Champions League game. Then that West Ham game now, so that one is called off. They'll have an FA Cup fixture instead. And then they face Liverpool at home. So fairly tough run, but Manchester City and Man City, they can beat anyone. So I think they're still a good team to target, but you do have to consider that they're going to have less fixtures than some of these other teams. Then I'm going to come on to Spurs then. So Spurs, they've had back-to-back clean sheets and they are looking a little bit better recently. Still not blowing teams away, but they are one that I could potentially be looking at to target in March. So they face Wolves away. They have AC Milan at home in the Champions League second leg. They have Forest at home. They have this in the week that could be an FA Cup reschedule one. That's Southampton, but obviously that's based on how Southampton and Spurs get on in the FA Cup, so we could pretty much rule that one out. And then Everton away, so 5 fixtures potentially for Spurs. They could dip down to 4, but I do think both of the teams are favourite to qualify in that one. So I think Spurs probably safely should have 5 fixtures. Liverpool, they had a potential to have 6 fixtures, but they now definitely play 5 due to the results yesterday. So Fulham beating Leeds in the FA Cup means that where Liverpool are out, they will have a blank fixture there. So Liverpool face Man United at home, so a hard game in that first one. Man U at home. They have no midweek fixture. They have Bournemouth away. They have Real Madrid in that second leg game, which I don't think they'll be turning around, so they'll be going out of the Champions League. Then they face, well, it's down as Fulham at home, but I think that one is now scrapped. And then they have Man City away and Chelsea away. So Liverpool do have some real tough games there, actually. So Man United at home, that's a tough one. Bournemouth is a good fixture. Real Madrid away at the Bernabeu, that one's going to be awful. Fulham is rescheduled or cancelled. Man City away, Chelsea away. So 5 fixtures now for Liverpool, and they do look fairly tough. But I'm going to put them right up there because they still have got some good players to target. So West Ham, they have a potential of 7 fixtures. This is quite an interesting one. They have Manchester United in the FA Cup tonight, so it could dip down to possibly 6 fixtures. And their run is where they've got the Europa League Conference coming up. They have Brighton away. They have AEK Larnaca in the Europa League Conference. They have a home game against Villa. They have that second leg in the Europa League Conference. Then they face City away, Southampton at home, and Newcastle at home. So obviously there are some tough fixtures here, but West Ham are starting to pick up their pace at the minute. They did look quite good in the previous fixture, and they do have the volume as well. But you are betting on a team that has sort of been mixing it down in the relegation zone. So it is a little bit of a risk, but they do have the volume. So this will be an interesting one to look at in a minute. Then Brighton with 6 fixtures. That is now confirmed because they've gone through in the FA Cup. So they have West Ham at home. They don't have a midweek. They have Leeds away, Crystal Palace at home. They have FA Cup fixture to be scheduled. They have Brentford at home and Bournemouth away. Then on to Newcastle then. So they only have the 5 fixtures in March, and there's some fairly tough ones in there. So people are really starting to move off of these Newcastle players at the minute. And quite rightly so, because they have Man City away in the next game. They face Wolves at home. They have Forest away, that Manchester United at home following that, and then they have West Ham away. So some pretty tough fixtures thrown in there. Wolves and Forest do look like fairly good fixtures. West Ham looks okay, but they are sandwiched between Manchester United at home and Man City away. So it's going to be quite hard to navigate if you do want the Newcastle players in there. Then on to Chelsea, who have a guaranteed 6 fixtures. And the fixtures do look really good for Chelsea. But there's one problem. They've been rubbish. So 6 fixtures. They have Leeds at home, Borussia Dortmund at home in that second leg of the Champions League. They have Leicester away, Everton at home, Aston Villa at home, and then Liverpool at home. So they've got, well, 5 out of those 6 fixtures are all home games. So that does look pretty good. But obviously you will be betting against form. So if you think they could turn it around, it could be a good one. But it's not looking good at the minute for Chelsea. Brentford, they've now got guaranteed 6 fixtures. So they face Fulham at home, Everton away, Southampton away, Leicester at home, Brighton away, and then Manchester United away. And the last team that I'm going to cover for March is Leicester with their 5 fixtures. And these are going to be Southampton away, Chelsea at home, Brentford away, Crystal Palace away, and Aston Villa at home. So 3 pretty good fixtures towards the end. Obviously that Chelsea home fixture is not one to fear as much as you previously would have. And then Southampton away also looking like a fairly good fixture. So some good ones there for Leicester if you do think they can have a good month. Right, so coming on to my team Arsenal then first. So we have Bournemouth at home, Sporting away, Fulham away, Sporting at home in that Europa League second leg, Crystal Palace at home and Leeds at home. So I do think this is a really good run for Arsenal players. If they can get close to maximum points as well, it's going to be really on in the title race. It does get a lot harder in April for Arsenal, but I do think this is a really good time to capitalise on the Arsenal players on Dream Team. So I'm going to start off with Saka at 4.8 million. He's got 10 goals and 9 assists so far this season. I do think it's quite a toss-up between Saka and Ødegaard at the minute for that midfield Arsenal role. It's up to you, and it probably comes down to budget a little bit as well. Saka 4.8, Ødegaard 3.4. Ødegaard is still up there with goals and assists. He's got 8 goals, 6 assists. I've just recently moved from Ødegaard to Saka, as I just think there's a bit more upside with Saka at the minute. He's scoring more goals, he's assisting more, and he is the penalty taker if we are ever awarded any, which I think we deserved one against Leicester with Saka getting brought down. So if he was given that one, which I think it was the referee after the game said he thought it should have been a penalty, could have been a different story. We could have had another goal there for Saka. So I think Saka has the most upside, but I don't see anything wrong with choosing Ødegaard as well. One thing I would say though with those midfield slots or those striker spots, Eddie Nketiah, Martinelli and Trossard are all taking minutes off of each other at the moment. So I wouldn't be looking at any of those players, to be honest with you. Eddie Nketiah had been starting the majority of games up front for Arsenal, but he was rested for Trossard in the previous game. And Trossard did pretty well. So I do think there's a chance that Trossard could get a few more games in that striker role. And I do expect that when those Europa League games come as well, Eddie, Martinelli and Trossard will be the players that are mixed around quite a bit. Ødegaard's probably got more chance of being rotated than Saka in my opinion. But when I look back at the Europa League fixtures from the group stages, both Saka and Ødegaard started 2 games each and came off the bench 4 times. So exactly the same amount of starts and appearances in the Europa League for both of them. But I do just think that Saka, when it comes down to the crunch and the knockouts, I think Saka is more likely to play than Ødegaard. But then coming on to defence, so looking at these fixtures, Sporting away, Bournemouth at home, Sporting away, Fulham away, Sporting at home, Crystal Palace at home and Leeds at home. There are some really good games, and then against teams that aren't scoring a lot of goals at the minute either. So Bournemouth and Crystal Palace really stand out as fixtures. Both at home, and these teams aren't scoring a ton of goals at the minute. And Arsenal's defence has been fairly good recently. So we're going to come on to defenders because I think these will be quite good to target. You've got Gabriel at 3.6 million. He's got the most points out of the Arsenal defenders. You've got Ben White closely behind him at 4.1. He's got the second most. Then Zinchenko at 3.6 and Saliba at 2.7. So Zinchenko and Saliba aren't really up there when it comes to points at the minute. And I've got a little table down here in the bottom left. I took the data from FFSTUFF. So Gabriel and White, 106 points and 101 points. And then Zinchenko's only on 57 and Saliba's only on 71. However, Zinchenko did play quite a few less fixtures, so he's played 21, where all of the other players are around the sort of 30 mark. So he has played less games, but then when you look at his points per game, 2.7, if he did sort of boost those games played up, he still would be quite below the likes of the others as well. So Zinchenko's one that I'm not completely sold on at the minute. I do think these fullbacks would be really good to target with the Europa League. If they don't start, Mikel Arteta does seem to bring the fullbacks off the bench. So I do think there's a good chance if Zinchenko wasn't to start against Sporting, which I think Tierney will start, I do think Zinchenko will end up coming on the pitch at some point. So he still is a really good player to target, but he just doesn't quite have the numbers of these other defenders. And when you look at 7 ratings as well, you've got Ben White with 12 7 ratings, Gabriel with 11 7 ratings, and then Zinchenko and Saliba are down there with 6 and 5. So Ben White and Gabriel do seem to be getting the rating points quite a bit more than the other two. Then when it comes to Europa League games as well, Gabriel started 4 Europa League games and then played 1 off the bench. Versus Saliba, for example, if you wanted to go the centre-back route, Saliba only started 2 and then didn't have any bench appearances. So Gabriel over Saliba when you're looking at centre-backs, it probably looks like the best way to go. And then full-backs, Ben White started 2 in Europa League and then played 3 off the bench. So like I said, there's only 1 game he didn't feature in Europa League, even though he only started 2. So there is a lot of rotation in those fullback positions. So Ben White is still a fairly good option, but he's 4.1 million, which is a bit more expensive than the others. Then Zinchenko, this is a tough one because Zinchenko actually had no Europa League starts, but he did come off the bench once. But I think this could be a little bit skewed because I have a feeling that he was injured around that Europa League time. So I might not read too much into it, but Tierney did start every Europa League game. So if you are hoping to get Zinchenko in your team, I'd expect that he only makes bench appearances in these Europa League games, in my opinion anyway. So if I had to rank these defenders in terms of most appealing to bring in, I'd probably say Gabriel's the most appealing for me. He's got a lot of attacking threat from corners, but he just seems the most nailed as well. So I'd say Gabriel first. The data says White second, but I do think White and Zinchenko, there probably isn't that much between the two of them. And the fact that White is 4.1 million and Zinchenko is 3.6, I still think I would maybe lean towards the cheaper in Zinchenko because he has really picked up his form recently. So I still think he's a good pick. And then Saliba, 2.7 still does seem really good value. But as you can see, he's not getting as many ratings. And he's not getting the starts in Europa League. So I'd probably say Saliba is the least favourable option for me from Arsenal. Obviously, you've got the non-starting players like Tierney and Tomiyasu, who I'd rate lower than these 4. But that is my order for the Arsenal defenders. Then on to Manchester United then. So they have the potential for 7 fixtures. So they have Liverpool away, Real Betis at home in the Europa League, Southampton at home, Betis away. That Brighton fixture is now going to be either an FA Cup fixture or a blank. Newcastle away and then Brentford at home. So quite obvious picks really to start off with for Man United. Rashford, 6.5 million. You should have him by now. 25 goals and 7 assists. And then I'm going to say, as a pair, I really do like Rashford and Bruno. I've got this combination in quite a lot of my teams. So Bruno at 6.1, 7 goals and 10 assists. And Bruno's now got 28 ratings from 38 games, which is the most ratings of any player. And then he's 99% owned in the top 100 now as well. So Bruno and Rashford, I think, are near enough essential for this run of fixtures personally. So 1 striker and 1 midfielder from Man United. I think this is a really good way to go. Then on to the Man United defenders then. So Luke Shaw, 3.8 million. I do think he's the best option. Rumours going around that he might miss this FA Cup fixture against West Ham this evening. But he has played a lot of minutes recently and he hasn't been rotating as much as on the other side. You've got Dalot and Wan-Bissaka. Shaw's got Malacia on his side, but they do seem a little bit reluctant to rotate as much as they do with Dalot and Wan-Bissaka. So Shaw at 3.8 million. He's got 1 goal, 5 assists and 13 ratings so far this season. And he's now overtaken Dalot, who was up there as the top scoring defender for Man United for pretty much most of the season, despite being injured for quite some time. So I think Shaw is probably the best option in defence for Man United, just as long as this knock or injury or rest doesn't turn out to be something different. Then Dalot at 4 million, so they are really close on points. There's not much in it at the minute, but Dalot has played a lot less games. 4 million for Dalot. He's got 1 goal, 3 assists, and 14 ratings. So still has more ratings than Luke Shaw, but slightly less attacking returns. But there's not much in it. I do think Dalot and Shaw are still the best options from Man United in defence, just because of the attacking upside. But with Dalot, there is a good chance that he could be rotated quite a bit with Wan-Bissaka, especially as they got so many fixtures. And Wan-Bissaka's been playing really well. Like with his one-on-one defending, he's been really good. And even in Dream Team, he's been scoring really well. So I think that Dalot, you've got more risk of rotation. But kind of like with Arsenal, Man United do rotate their fullbacks mid-game quite a lot. I think it happened in the FA Cup, in the Carabao Cup final as well. So Dalot come off at, it might have been half-time for Wan-Bissaka. So a lot of rotation there. And if you do have them and they're not starting, there is a real good chance they'll come on anyway and get the clean sheet points potentially. Then Martinez, 4.5 million. So he's a bit more expensive than the others. And he is a centre-back with a bit less attacking upside. But he is nailed for pretty much all the games at the minute. Doesn't seem to get many knocks or injuries or anything like that. Isn't rested that often either. So Martinez, I mean, if you're going for a full block of Man United, I'd still go Shaw, Dalot, Martinez. But if you were just picking like 1 or 2 Man United defenders, I think I still would go Shaw and Dalot over Martinez. Wan-Bissaka is obviously a fairly good option if you did want to max out the full Man United defence. But I'm not going to put him down here because I do think these 3 are better than him. Then De Gea, he's probably the only goalkeeper I'm going to mention in this whole run because I just think he's the best value goalkeeper at the minute. Man United have a ton of games and they are keeping clean sheets as well. So De Gea at 3.8, I still think he's the best goalkeeper to target at the moment. Casemiro has been fairly popular, but I just can't get my head around bringing in a... well, he's not been quite a defensive midfielder, but it just isn't for me at the minute. He has been scoring really well on Dream Team, getting the Starman Awards, getting the ratings, but it just isn't for me. So he's someone that you could potentially look to target, but I just think there's better options out there. And then Anthony and Sancho, I see people mentioning these quite a bit. I'm not interested in these either myself personally. I do think there's quite a few good midfielders to choose from. So I won't be going Anthony or Sancho. I won't be going Casemiro. But there's still maybe some merit in choosing these players. Just a quick reminder that if you're new to the channel, please do like and subscribe for more Sun Dream Team content. If you're listening on Spotify, please do give us a follow on there as well. And drop a comment below if you have any questions throughout the video. Then Manchester City then with their 5 fixtures in March. So compared to Arsenal and Man United, they're going to have less fixtures in this month. But they do have quite a lot of home fixtures. So they've got Newcastle at home. They have Crystal Palace away. They have RB Leipzig at home in the Champions League. Obviously, that West Ham game actually is now going to be rearranged because they'll have an FA Cup fixture there after beating Bristol. But then they have Liverpool at home as well. So 5 fixtures, they're okay. There's some tough ones thrown in there. We'll have to wait and see who they get in the FA Cup. But like I said, Man City can beat anyone. So I still wouldn't be taking Manchester City players out of your team en masse, but it is one thing to consider. I'm going to start with Phil Foden, and I mention this, by the way, on every episode. Haaland, obviously, I'm going to just assume that everyone has him. Foden at 4.6 million has sort of come flying back out of nowhere, so he's been a bit out of favour recently, had a few knocks and stuff like that, but Foden's got back into the team, and he's scoring goals, he's assisting, getting star man, and he looks like he could be a completely credible pick again for March. And some people went really early as well. So Kevin De Bruyne was ill and missed a couple of games. I think it was 2 games Kevin De Bruyne missed. And a few people I've seen took the incentive to bring Foden straight back in as a punt. And that one's paid off massively. I think he's got 30 odd points now from the last 2 games. He got a goal and assist against Bournemouth. He got a goal Against Bristol, they've given him 2 goals, even though I think the second one really should have been an own goal. We've seen earlier in the week that they'd gone back and given Rashford an own goal. They've been really muddled in whether or not they give goals to these strikers in this situation, and it's been really inconsistent. So a little bit annoying, but they've given him 2 goals against Bristol. He's had back-to-back starts now, and he's just eaten into Grealish and Mahrez's minutes now at the minute. So one thing I looked at as well for Foden, he's got 12 goals and 6 assists for the season, which is ridiculous. It's more than Mahrez at the minute. Obviously, he's just scored a few goals and got a couple of assists in the games recently, but where he hasn't been playing that recently, and he had a bit where he wasn't playing before the World Cup, he didn't play much after the World Cup. The bulk of Foden's goals and assists must have come really early in the season. So he's still right up there with his attacking returns. And if he can find some form again, could be a really good pick. Just the only thing to consider is Pep Roulette, and he might be rotated with Mahrez and Grealish. But I do think you have to sort of get on these players while they're hot. And at 4.6 million, that does look good value for Phil Foden. Mahrez at 6 million, he's a player that I've got in my teams. He's got 12 goals and 5 assists now. That went up to 6 assists yesterday against Bristol. I didn't update this. So 12 goals, 6 assists. His last 5 average was around 4.6. So still a really good player to own, but he might now get slightly less minutes with Foden. Initially, earlier in the season, it seemed like it was Foden and Grealish that were fighting it out over that left-hand side spot. But now Foden's playing off the right as well and eating into Mahrez's minutes. So great to own, but Man City now have got less fixtures. And if you're picking Foden, Grealish, Mahrez, you've got to accept there's a good chance that they're not going to play all 5. Then on to Kevin De Bruyne then. So 7.3 million. And he'd been a little bit disappointing. And it wasn't really through any fault of his own, to be honest. But he had the 2 missing games earlier this month in February due to illness. And at 7.3 million, it's so frustrating if you have a player that ends up missing games. Like I said, some people took him out for Mahrez, which is for Foden, which is brilliant. That was a really good transfer. But personally, I just thought with Kevin De Bruyne, if I take him out, I'm going to want him back in, and then I'm going to have to use a transfer for it. So I've kept De Bruyne, and luckily, he did get a goal against Bristol yesterday, so he's on 5 goals and 18 assists now. But I know it was disappointing when he had those 2 blanks when he was ill. But before those blanks, he had 15 points and 8 points with back-to-back Star Man awards. So he still is a really, really good pick. He's expensive. He's been a little bit frustrating this year, but his numbers are still ridiculous. And if he can keep chipping away with some extra goals, I think he still could be a really good pick. Obviously, 5 goals. It was 4 goals before yesterday. Was a little bit disappointing. He had 18 assists, which you only get the 2 points for. So it would have been nice if he got a few more goals this season. But I still would be really reluctant to sell Kevin De Bruyne at the minute. So I'm going to keep him on this list. But then coming on to defence, it doesn't really feel like a great month to target Man City defenders. They did get the clean sheet points against Bristol City, and they played a really strong lineup as well against Bristol City. So they did get the clean sheet points there. But before that, before Bristol City, they'd kept 2 clean sheets in the last 10 games. So that's up to 3 clean sheets in the last 10. But with the fixtures they had, you really did expect a bit more from them. And now they've got so many defenders that it's really difficult to choose the right pairing. I've put down that I think that Ake is probably the best option. He does seem to be getting a lot of minutes at the minute. And then Ruben Diaz is now, since he's been back from injury, he does seem to be starting a lot of games. But Diaz is really quite expensive for what he is. Ake is probably a more reasonable price, but it's just whether or not you think they're going to get these clean sheets. Newcastle at home, I think they might have even conceded 3 against Newcastle in the last fixture, so that's not a guaranteed one. Crystal Palace, I do like that fixture for clean sheets. RB Leipzig at home, that one might be okay. Leipzig scored 1 against them in the other fixture. We'll have to wait and see what the FA Cup fixture's like. But then Liverpool at home as well. Liverpool are more than capable enough of scoring against City. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, and a bit with Mahrez, Foden and Grealish. If you do pick a defender for this run of 5 games, there's a good chance that they're going to maybe be dropped or benched for at least one or maybe two of these. So it's going to be a really hard pick. They are good, but you got to have a crystal ball to predict them. Then on to Spurs then. So don't have that many players to target for Spurs at the moment. Bar the obvious one in Harry Kane. But we'll start with their fixtures. They are away at Wolves in the first game. They are home to AC Milan in that Champions League second leg. They face Forest at home. That game against Southampton could be postponed, or it could be a blank, depending on whether or not they go through in the FA Cup. And then they face Everton away. So I do think this is actually a really good run of fixtures, to be honest. So we'll have to maybe consider that Southampton game written off potentially. But Wolves away, AC Milan at home, Forest at home, and then Everton away. They do look like some good fixtures. Defensively, they do look quite good. Spurs have had 2 back-to-back clean sheets, but it's really hard to choose the Spurs defenders at the minute. So we're going to start with Harry Kane up front at 8 million. He's got 20 goals and 5 assists this season so far. And I had a look and I was surprised to see he'd only actually had 4-star man awards, which was, 4-star man awards in a team where he's near enough a one-man team, in my opinion. I thought 4-star mans was pretty strange, but he has had 20 ratings, which is pretty big still. If deciding between Salah and Kane, this seems to be like the big question at the minute, because Rashford's on fire. Haaland is just Haaland. So if you have 3 strikers, it looks like it will be between Kane and Salah who to choose. I think it looks like Kane's got the better fixtures for March. Salah does potentially have an extra game depending on how the FA Cup fixtures go, but Salah will face the likes of Real Madrid, Man United, Manchester City and Chelsea. So tough fixtures for Salah. And Kane's fixtures do look fairly good with Forest. Forest are conceding goals now. Wolves away. Everton, they scored a few against Everton in the last fixture. So Everton away. So there are some fairly good fixtures there for Spurs. So Kane is a good option. And at least for the start of March, I think that Kane probably has the better fixtures than Salah. So I'd be looking at Salah. I'd be looking at Kane over Salah, and especially in those first couple of fixtures where Kane doubles and Salah doesn't. When it comes to defence, I'm not feeling this myself, but this is because I was personally scarred earlier in the season. But Emerson Royale at 4 million. He's had back-to-back Star Man awards now. He's got 2 goals and 2 assists for the season, but it's just not for me. So they're looking better at the back. But personally, I know you shouldn't be scarred by these players and you should give them a fresh start. But I owned Emerson Royale at the start of the season. I looked into his numbers and thought he'd been pretty good. When I put him in, he got minus points 3 games in a row and got that red card against Arsenal. So for me, he's written off for this season. It'll take a little bit more to forgive him, but he could be up there if you fancy it. Then coming on to Liverpool then. So Mohamed Salah is going to be the place I start here. So he's 8.3 million. He scored points in all of his last 4 games. So he still is performing fairly well at the minute, even though Liverpool haven't been at their best. He's got 1-star man, 2 goals and 2 assists in his last 4 games. So doing pretty well. And then 18 goals, 8 assists for the season. So I do still expect him to score fairly well in this run. The decision is just, do you think he's going to score more than Harry Kane? That's the tougher one. The only thing I would consider, so although these fixtures do look quite tough on paper for Liverpool, Man United at home, Bournemouth away looks like a good one, but then Real Madrid away, that Fulham game's blanked now, that one's called off, so they lose a fixture there. Man City away and then Chelsea away. The only thing I would say about these tougher fixtures is Salah did pretty well, even though Real Madrid done them pretty badly in the last leg of the Champions League tie. Salah still scored, and I think he assisted in that game as well. So I still think that Liverpool do have the potential to score in these games. Sometimes they do better against teams that do come out and play against them. So City will play against them. Man United will still probably be quite open. Real Madrid will be open. I still think there's good chance for a player like Salah to get goals and assists in this run of fixtures. It's more the defensive side, which is a little bit of a worry. So I still wouldn't blame you if you decided to go with Salah for this run of games. Um, Man United, Bournemouth, Real Madrid, Man City, and Chelsea. Well, Chelsea haven't quite been the team that they've previously been as well. So I would still potentially pick Salah. Trent, 4.9 million. So I've had some good times with Trent recently. So 4.9 million. Obviously, I think that conceding 5 goals against Real Madrid really has skewed the opinion on Liverpool's defence and distracted people a little bit on Liverpool's defence. I know they haven't been solid by any means, but when you look at Dream Team points, they've kept 3 clean sheets from their last 4 games. So, yep, they conceded 5 against Real Madrid. Some of the players got -4 points, but a player like Trent got massive points either side of that. So I still don't think it's completely off the table to rule out a player like Trent Alexander-Arnold. I obviously wouldn't be going big on the Liverpool defence, but Trent does have the ability to get those attacking returns, goals, assists. He's taken all the set pieces. He could have scored a free kick the other day if Henderson didn't header it clear. So I think that Trent is still a fairly good option. And I know people might not disagree, but I still quite like Trent. And then his average rating for the season as well. His average rating from who scored is 6.9. Even when Liverpool have been defending poorly, he's getting decent ratings. So there's always a chance that you could still get some points off him. And then he's got a total of 97 points, which is actually only 20 points off of the likes of Luke Shaw, who's like the 3rd highest defender in the game at the minute. So even though Liverpool aren't doing that well in defence, Trent is still right up there, and I still think he is an option if you do fancy it. In terms of other players from Liverpool, though, you've got quite a lot of attacking options now. You've got Firmino, you've got Jota, you've got Gakpo, you've got Darwin Núñez. Luis Diaz, I think, is down as a midfielder, but he's due to come back fairly soon. I'm going to avoid any other strikers just because I think there's too much rotation. Darwin Núñez has had a bit of injury problems lately. Jota's back. Firmino's back. I think Salah's probably the only one that's guaranteed to play every game. And then with the others, I think there's a good chance that they'll either be rotated mid-game or rotated in general. So I would avoid the other Liverpool strikers for the moment. I probably wouldn't even consider any other Liverpool defenders, to be honest, at the minute. I think Trent has that upside, but some of the other defenders from Liverpool, you're probably relying on clean sheets, and I'm not sure how many I think they'll get in this run. So obviously, Robertson at 3.8 million. If he was anywhere near how he'd been in previous seasons, that looks like ridiculous value at 3.8. Virgil van Dijk obviously hasn't been the player he's been previously. Yeah, I just think that I would go with Trent over any of these options, really. And if you did want to look at Robertson at 3.8 million, I just think you'd maybe better spend that money on Arsenal defence or Manchester United defence. Then on to West Ham then. So I'm going to start with Bowen at 3.8 million. Obviously, this is quite a good run of fixtures. They have Brighton away, they have AEK Larnaca, they have Aston Villa at home, they have the return leg at home against Larnaca. Man City away, that one's postponed, so we don't have to worry about that one now. It could be an FA Cup fixture if West Ham can beat Man United. Then they have Southampton at home and Newcastle at home. So a bit of a mixed bag there, but still they've got the volume of fixtures, and well, especially if they go through in the FA Cup against Man United, they could still have a possible 7 fixtures. So that does look fairly good. Bowen's the one I would realistically look at. So he has a good chance of starting pretty much all of these fixtures. If they do have 7, it probably will get a rest in a few of them. Maybe the Europa League conference games. I'm starting to think, from my point of view, if you're in West Ham's position in the league at the minute, how much do you actually need to go for that Europa League conference? I know it's nice, but if you're right down there mixing it up near the relegation zone, I think I'd just focus on winning those Premier League games, to be honest. So maybe there'll be rotation in Europa League conference. We'll wait and see what Moyes does. But Bowen at 3.8, he's got 8 goals, 4 assists this season. And if he's anything like last season, I know he didn't start this season as well, but last season he got 18 goals and 14 assists. So if he can start to reach somewhere similar to that form again, I think he could be a really good pick for March. And he's hit double figures 3 times in his last 6 games with 18 points, 13 points and 10 points. So I do think that Bowen really could be a good one to target. I don't know if I'm going to do it myself, but I do think he is a really good option. Danny Ings at 3.2 million. Obviously, they've got good fixture volume and fairly good fixtures, but realistically, with Danny Ings' injury record, I think if I was Moyes, I would only be playing him in those Premier League fixtures. Prioritise the Premier League and having your goal scorer keep you up, keep you in the league. I don't know if I'm being harsh, but I do think that they've been better recently, but they were in amongst it. So I still think they need to focus on getting their league position up, and they need Danny Ings for that. Would I be starting him in Europa League with his injury record? Probably not. So I think that we're probably only going to see Danny Ings play sort of one fixture a week, to be honest. I can't see him playing in all of these. Then on to Brighton then. So they're back as an option with their good amount of games in March. So they have West Ham at home, Leeds away, Crystal Palace at home. That game against Man United is now going to be rescheduled and they'll have an FA Cup fixture to be announced there. Then they have Brentford at home and Bournemouth away. So pretty good fixtures actually for Brighton. And that puts Matoma back on the table. 3.5 million. Obviously, if you watch quite regularly, you'll know that I had him previously. 7 goals, 3 assists for the season and 84 points. And he got another assist in the FA Cup against Stoke. So still a really good pick, Matoma. 3.5 million though, he's gone up in price quite a lot. So that is something to consider. But I do think for this run of games, he could be another good one to have in your team. And then Solly March, 3.4 million. There's not much in it between the two of them actually. So 0.1 in price difference. March has 5 goals, 6 assists for the season, but he has slightly more points. He has 4 more points than Matoma at 88, but I do think Matoma slightly edges it for me. It does look like a decent run in defence for Brighton. I would say Estepinian would be the best player to target in defence at 3 million, but he has had a knock in that last game. He didn't play yesterday. He got a knock in knock in the Premier League, so I'd just keep an eye and see if he will be available, see what his fitness is like before bringing him in. But he does have 7 assists for the season, so by far the most attacking returns from this Brighton defence. And if you wanted to go for it, but you don't quite have the money, Dunk at 2.3 million is an option, but I don't feel that enthusiastic about it, to be honest, that one. Then on to Newcastle then. So I don't have as much enthusiasm about Newcastle at the moment. Kieran Trippier at 6.5 million is now starting to look a bit expensive. He's a Starman machine and ratings machine, but he has only got 2.4 points over the last 5 games now, and Newcastle are experiencing a little bit of a dip. Trippier has been fairly reliable scoring against the big teams, which is fairly good because they face Man City away in this run of games. They also face Man United at home. So it starts with Man City away, they have Wolves at home, Forest away, Man United at home, and then West Ham away. So okay fixtures with Wolves and Forest, but they're sandwiched between Man City and Man United, which are going to be 2 tough games. Obviously, they did just get beat by Man United in the Carabao Cup final as well, and West Ham are looking a little bit better at the minute. So I don't think the fixtures look great. Kieran Trippier is probably the only person I would either keep or consider having. I probably wouldn't be bringing him especially, but I wouldn't look to ship him out specifically if I had him already. His points against the top 6 teams, or the big 6, have been fairly good previously. So I've just put a little graphic in the bottom left here. But against City last time out, he got a 7.5 rating, a goal and 5 points. It didn't get a rating against Liverpool, but it got 6.9, and that was in the first fixture. He actually did go on to get a rating and closely to get Star Man in the last time they faced Liverpool too. So I haven't added that one there. Against Man United, he got 13 points and Star Man. Against Spurs, he got 8.2, 8 points and Star Man. And against Chelsea and Arsenal, he got assists in both games, 13 points and 7 points. So I wouldn't rule it out just because he's playing Man City and Man United that he won't get the Star Man or he won't get attacking returns. It just doesn't look that great when you are looking at fixtures. So Trippier is the only one that I would really consider from Newcastle having in my team at the minute. But as a disclaimer, I don't have him in my top 2 teams at the moment. Then on to Chelsea. So this is a tough one because I actually think the fixtures look quite good for Chelsea. Leeds at home, Borussia Dortmund at home in the second leg of the Champions League. They face Leicester away, Everton at home, Villa at home, and Liverpool at home. So they've got 5 out of their 6 games are all to be played at home. So that is something to be in their favour. But they've got no wins in their last 6 games. Thiago Silva is now out injured as well for a little while. So that's going to make the defence less solid. And there's just so much rotation as well at Chelsea. So the only person I'm going to highlight is Reece James, 5.7 million. The reason I've put him here is because I was actually looking towards bringing in Reece James back in February, but I had my eye on this run of fixtures for bringing him in, but I didn't anticipate that things were going to go so badly for them in terms of results. So I do think Reece James could be a good option, but it's gone from being looking good to being a fairly big punt now on current form. But if they do turn it around, this is going to be the run of fixtures to do it in. But the only thing with Reece James, he can get those attacking returns. But now Thiago Silva is out injured, I still worry for their clean sheet points as well. So Reece James, 5.7, probably going to be the only one that I would look to bring in. But I must say I have been put off by their recent form, to be honest with you. As it goes for midfielders and attackers, I'm not going to put any down, to be honest with you, unless things drastically change with their form. Midfield and attack, there's just so much rotation, and they only scored 1 goal in February. So for me, the attack and midfield, although the fixtures are good, I would have to see something major before I decided to bring them in. The only thing that might change my mind is, and I don't want him to be sacked. I think they should. I honestly do think they should stick with Potter, especially through this run to turn things around. But knowing Chelsea, if they did bring in a new manager, these would be really good fixtures for a new manager bounce. So if they did bring in a new manager, I think I still might consider bringing in an attacker or midfielder, but it is a massive punt. Then I'm going to go on to Brentford, but this has changed since I made the slide. So I thought a punt on Toney would be lovely for this run of fixtures. So Fulham at home, Everton away, Southampton away, Leicester at home, Brighton at home, and then Man United away. So some good fixtures there for Brentford and for Ivan Toney, who's been doing really well this season. But I just think it's a bit risky because he's just pleaded guilty to his betting charges. So God knows what's going to happen there. But then again, this came out ages ago and still nothing has been done about it. So whether or not anything happens this season or soon, I'm not sure. But another thing to consider, which I saw from Andy Let's Talk FPL, he's 2 yellow cards away from suspension at the moment. And he gets a booking approximately every 2.6 games. So if you do think in this run of fixtures that he could pick up bookings, which is quite likely, he could end up missing a game as well. So there's a few things working against Toney, but I do still think it could be a good one. The only thing that puts me off is that I'm pretty certain that I'm going to stick with Haaland, Rashford, and either Kane or Salah. But if you are chasing, I think I still would look at taking a punt on Toney potentially. Then Leicester City, so they face Southampton away, Chelsea at home. Then they've got Brentford away, Crystal Palace away, and Villa away. So their fixtures do look good towards the end of this run. Maddison, though, he's been out injured for the last game. I do think he's a good option when fit, but he has struggled with his fitness this season. There are a few good other options like Iheanacho or Harvey Barnes, but to be honest, I just think those attacking slots, there's just much better options out there at the minute, and Maddison is quite off-putting at that higher price. I still think the likes of Bruno Fernandes, the Man City midfielders, and even Saka and Ødegaard still, in my opinion, will be better picks. But if you are chasing and you wanted someone that's a bit different, if Maddison is fit, I would still look at him potentially. Then a quick look at my team updates then. So this is my vlog team. I've got David De Gea in goal, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Luke Shaw and Ake in defence. So De Gea got me 4 points, Trent's got me 5, Luke Shaw's got me 9, and Ake got me 11 with that final clean sheet from Bristol City eventually. We've been waiting for that one for a while. Bruno Fernandes in midfield got me 3 points. De Bruyne has got me 8 points. He grabbed a goal. Mahrez got an assist, so he's on 5 points. And Saka has blanked for me so far this week. Rashford up front, 13 points. He got gifted that goal that was initially an own goal. Salah up front's got me the 3 points, and Haaland up front has got me the 8. So 69 points for the game week. My total points is now up to 1,694, and my overall rank was at 1.1k. My target was 1k, and now I'm down to 863rd. So inside the top 1k. Happy about that, and looking to see where I can go from here. Transfers remaining, I've got one left this month. With 1.6 in the bank. The transfers that I've got in mind for March, obviously I can make one still in February, and then I'm going to keep an eye on March, obviously. Would be either Salah back to Harry Kane for that double game week he has next week, and some fairly good fixtures as well. And Ake, I know he has kept that clean sheet against Bristol, but I'm starting to think I might want to bring in an Arsenal defender in his place. So I would be looking at potentially Gabriel in the place of Ake. That is my plans for this team at the moment. But still, filming this on Wednesday, so I've still got a little bit of time to think about it. But that is what I've got in my head at the moment. Then on to my second best team then. So obviously this is after the Tuesday games have taken place. I've got 78 points from this team, and helped out by the Man City block, which has been crap lately, but done all right against Bristol. Took a game against Bristol City to finally get a clean sheet. So total points 1,619. Overall rank was 6.1k, has now dropped to 3.8k. And transfers remaining is 1 with 1.8 in the bank. So David De Gea in goal. I kept the Man United defender here, goalkeeper here. But in defence, I went for a Kanji, who got me 7. I've got Walker, who got me none. Diaz is on 11, and Ake on 11 for the week. Midfield's fairly similar, so I've got De Bruyne, Mahrez and Bruno. And then up front, it's the same with Haaland and Rashford, but I went for Harry Kane in this team that's got me the 8 points. So I'm happy with the front 6, to be honest, with this team set up for March. De Bruyne, Mahrez, Bruno, Haaland, Kane, Rashford. The decision I'm going to have to make is whether I want to stick with the City defence with them having less fixtures, or do I want to revert to another block? Obviously, my team previously, that's the one I've got in the mini leagues. And that's my main team that I'm probably going to give the best effort to try and get a low rank. But this one, I'm probably going to be chasing now at 3.8k. So do I stick with the Man City block, or do I move on to another block? But it will cost me a lot of transfers. So I'll have to use 1 from this allocation, and then potentially 4 from the next, if I wanted to go for a full block. So yeah, that's the question I'm going to have in this one. Do I stick with Man City block, or do I maybe use 4 transfers to go to like an Arsenal block instead, for example? I'm still deciding. I don't want to do the Man United block, because that one is quite highly owned already. So it's either stick with Man City block or move to the Arsenal block for this one. Let me know what you think in the comments. I still haven't decided on this team. That is everything for this episode, so thank you very much for watching. If you've taken anything valuable from it at all, please do like and subscribe to the channel if you don't already. And if you're listening on Spotify, please do give us a follow on there as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.